St. Louis, I was teaching a mission course that was both for laity but also for seminary students.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't teach it at the seminary. We taught it at two different churches in the community. One site was the church where I was called in the south part of the city of St. Louis, on Tower Grove Park there, if you know St. Louis. The other site was a black mega church, a missionary Baptist church on the north side of town.
It's like, I'm guessing you're going north here for the other, yeah.
Yeah, on the north side of town in a bombed out, think Detroit, think Flint, Michigan, think like bombed out area of St. Louis. And then there was this big mega church, and around them the neighborhood was better.
Yeah.
Because they actually were investing in the neighborhood as a congregation. Not just it was better because it was close to a church. The congregation invested in the neighborhood. But outside of that little like donut hole of goodness, the north side of St. Louis, if you know anything about that town, is like, don't go up there, you know.
I mean, that's where, for people to remember, like the stuff that happened in Ferguson several years ago.
Yeah,
that's North St. Louis.
Yeah, that's North St. Louis. So I had a chance to teach at my own campus, but I said, no, get somebody else to teach at my campus. I'm with my people on Sundays and every other day of the week, and I want to go to this North Campus because these folks are from a different denomination than I am. They're from a different ethnic and cultural background than I am, and I really hope that I can. So I'm there to teach, right? I'm there to facilitate this learning for adult learning, but I also want to get to know these folks, and I want to learn from them, right? So I got awarded the North Campus, and so I would drive up there, and this lone white guy, I might as well have been like on a Segway, looking like Al Yankovic or something, this lone white guy going to the north part of town is all black, and I get up to Friendly Temple Baptist Church. Great church. If you're ever in St. Louis and you're not Lutheran, or you are Lutheran and you want to check out another place just for one Sunday, go to Friendly Temple Missionary Baptist Church on the north side of St. Louis for Sunday services. Those people are amazing. They are on fire for Jesus Christ. You will not regret it. Loved worshiping with these guys, just sitting in the pews with them. So great folks up there, and I learned a lot. Some of what I learned was in a formal setting, we would talk, or I'd be hanging out with their staff pastors and we'd have like a rap session, Some of it that I learned was from mistakes I made. So I'm teaching, right? I'm teaching, and I'm talking to laity about different ways that you can form partnerships in an urban system, right? So every church can't do everything. You can't reinvent the wheel for everything. So you form strategic partnerships with other people who are doing different things in a city system. And so I said, yeah, you can form partnerships with like a homeless mission, or you can form partnerships with if the city council has like a working task force for something, like having a church be part of that or have a voice in that is not a bad thing. It's not mixing religion and politics. It's really about social care in the community. You can work with other 501c3s that are not churches. So in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we would think about RSOs, like say here in Lincoln, it's Lutheran Family Services, somebody like that, right? There's all these partnerships, and then I said one of the partnerships you could forge is with your local police department. And I said this.
Did you feel like both feet were in your mouth, or
I was not prepared for the reaction. I was not prepared for it was such an immediate, visceral, gut negative reaction,
like
because
this communal groan of
it was a communal groan, like I just was not prepared for what it would mean for a well-meaning white guy to say in an all-black megachurch in a part of town where the way that they interact with the police in that context is very different than the way we interacted with the police on the south side of town.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for that visceral negative reaction to the idea you could form a partnership with the police. And I got so red in the face because I was like, oh no, I have just really done something wrong here.
It makes me think of the moment that you're in, and you're in a room, and if you're teaching or if you're preaching, it's like, and you're giving off examples like, "Okay, I've got them here. They're listening. They're engaged. They're with me. They're with me."
Right. And then suddenly I lose everybody.
And then all of a sudden it's like, "Wow, I said the wrong thing."
So I had to stop, and I did stop, and I said, "So talk to me about your relationship with the police, because the relationship in the community may look one way, but you're a church. This is the people of God here. So you talk to me about your relationship with the police, because I want to understand where your faith in Jesus Christ and your understanding of authority intersects with what it means to be a black man or black woman on this north side of St. Louis, and where's your culture coming in, and where's your theology coming in." And it eventually led to a really productive discussion. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I had a chance to push back to them a little bit on some of where culture and theology intersect. But at the same time, it showed that I had a woeful ignorance of what policing means to certain communities in the United States. Even though I'm supposed to be teaching the course on urban ministry, I'm definitely at that point guilty of teaching it from a white perspective rather than from a black perspective. So I thought we would talk a little bit about policing today, because this issue continues to come up in the wake of George Floyd, all of the defund police. Well, let's go back before George Floyd, though.
I agree. So a couple comments just to throw in here, too.
Yeah.
But the degree to which, the collective groan that you heard, what makes me think of is just the lack of trust.
Oh, total lack of trust.
Yeah.
Total lack of trust.
And so trust has been broken for a number of different reasons, and maybe we'll get into that. But the lack of trust there, and so, but also then, there's a fourth commandment piece here. Police are put in authority. We have authority as Americans, but also the fact that recognizing that in our American society, we talk about our American society sometimes as if it's monolithic, and it's not. There's so many different nuances and pockets.
It depends.
I mean, even just you and I.
Your perspective depends on how you grew up, your formative experiences.
You grew up in Tennessee, you're a Southerner. I grew up in the Great Plains. I'm a Nebraskan.
Yeah.
We get along great.
Yeah.
But culturally, there's a lot of differences too, and that's okay. And it's not a bad thing. It's the reality of who we are, and recognizing that there's all these different nuances about American society, and.
You realize, though, that there's plenty of people who would, this is going down a different rabbit hole. There's plenty of people who might be listening to this podcast and say that was an illegitimate statement. Now you're trying to make diversity out of two white guys. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
And no, I just want to admit that's a thing that somebody might say. I think they're wrong, because I know painfully when I make a mistake culturally around our parish, our church, our school, our early childhood center. I know painfully when I make a mistake in misreading the local culture, even though I'm with a predominantly white congregation, because I am from a different culture, and that really does exist. So no, if you're listening to this, it's not an attempt to make diversity out of white people so much as it is an attempt. I'm hearing you saying, look, the reality is we all have formative experiences, and we all have a culture that we come from. And that culture is not monolithic. It's not the same.
It might be ethnic. It might be related to race.
Well, and it's not always based on geography. It's not always based on your skin color.
Yeah,
it's not always based on your skin color. And that's important when you're talking with an African American, or when you're talking with a Latino, or when you're talking with whoever it is you're talking to. If you base your assumptions on skin color, you're already 2 strikes down.
Yep.
Because people have formative experiences, they have a local culture, and what I ran into there was the local culture on the north side of St. Louis, and it's a north of Del Mar thing.
Yep.
We had so much ethnic diversity in the neighborhood I was living and serving in St. Louis. On the south side, we had you could walk 5 blocks and hear 70 different languages.
Yep.
5 blocks, 70 different languages. So it wasn't white people interacting with the cops on the south side. It was everybody interacting with the cops on the south side, because it was 70 different ethnic groups, distinct. And yet that culture that diversity created was a completely different experience with the police than on north of Del Mar, where it was a very different animal. And that's what we're really trying to talk about right now.
So let's go back to what you said. You mentioned George Floyd, but again, let's back up further.
Right.
And it's been a little bit since I've read this and studied this, some of these pieces, but so I'm going to kind of give it a general gloss. But I think what I'm going to say is true. Is you look back over maybe say the last 25 years or so, especially in terms of policing, there's been an increased militarization of our police force. This comes some out of, frankly, our government spending, and we've spent a lot of money on,
Well, it's post 9/11.
Yeah, so
it's really, let's just get to the point. It's post 9/11.
So we're talking 22 years, yeah. So
it's been 22, 23 years now. It's post 9/11, and everybody's on a heightened awareness of another attack because we were sucker punched, and when you're sucker punched, now you're looking for where's the next attack going to come.
You're
right?
going to react to say, I don't want to be hurt like that again. I don't want to be
right.
I don't want to see that kind of travesty again. And not only that, but then we frankly spend a lot of money on military equipment.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So whether you're talking about body armor, helmets, you're talking about
armored Humvees,
all this stuff. The police forces,
the riot gear type stuff.
Yeah, the police forces around the country looked more like they were ready to go into a riot situation at all times. Gone was the cop in the suit jacket with the tie.
Yep.
And now what we're dealing with is someone who looks like they're about to go into a riot situation at any given moment, but they're just cruising in the cruiser on their beat.
Yep.
And that's a change. And that's pre-George Floyd. Now fast forward 20 years later to George Floyd. Okay? Yep. George Floyd happens. There's all these calls by certain political elements in the country for a defunding of the police. Some cities have tried it. It's been an absolute disaster, which lets other political elements in the country then say, ha, we told you so. We told you that was going to be a disaster, right?
And then maybe you try to double down on some other aspect that maybe isn't even necessarily a solution either, but it becomes... now a tit for tat sort of.
Let's look at what just happened in Memphis.
Yeah.
Let's look at what just happened in Memphis with those 5 officers who, beat a guy mercilessly, right? And people say, well, what's going on there? Well, what's going on in Memphis is that they did call for a defunding, and then it was a disaster. And then the next thing that happened was they have to get recruitment back up again because a lot of people just walked away from police work completely. And then what they have to do is get recruitment up by some other means. The city council is they're the ones that came up with the plan, not the police force. This is not the police chief of Memphis. This is a bunch of politicians who got elected in a popularity contest, right? And they're not experts at anything, but they just decide,
let's try this. And then they brought in officers through a vetting method that was a lower bar than what the Memphis police force was used to in a vetting process. And you got these people out there now with a badge and a gun who shouldn't have a badge or a gun. Or who are not as well trained, well equipped, well prepared to do the job that they need to do.
Which means they shouldn't have a badge or a gun.
Yep.
They're not ready, right?
Yep.
They're not ready. And so you didn't see the rioting and all this. These are 5 black cops. So it didn't have that racial charge to it or whatever. And I think the guy they beat up was a black guy too. So it didn't have that racial charge to it. So a lot of people wanted to gloss over it. But it's a serious problem on the back end of the calling for defunding police, and then you have to get the recruitment back up on the back end when people realize, no, we really need policing. The question I have for Americans today is, what in the world do y'all want from your police forces? Like, what is it that we as Americans want from our police? Because it's got to be a terrible time to get into law enforcement work, I would think, because it's so wishy-washy, it's so back and forth, the discussion is so politically charged. If you're in a red area, it's all about support the thin blue line and all that. If you're in a blue area, it's we want the money to go to social programs instead of police, and it's the reaction I got on the north side of town in St. Louis. Oh, police, ugh, what is it that we really think we want from policing, and do we understand what policing is, and frankly what policing is not?
Yeah. So this makes me go again, I guess, thinking about what policing should be, could be, what do we want policing to be, and recognizing whether it's George Floyd or it's the situation in Memphis, that there have been circumstances where horrible things have happened and police officers have made mistakes, and whether that has to do with Memphis and not having guys that should have been out with a badge and gun, or whether it's just been the fact that we live, and I don't mean this as a blanket statement to somehow, oh, it's fine to justify it, but we live in a sinful, broken world, and people do horrible things.
Well, I want to make the distinction between people who should never have a badge and a gun because they haven't been properly trained, and those who should have a badge and a gun because they have been properly trained, but they just made a bad call.
Yeah.
It happened. Why do you yell at the referee?
Yeah.
You yell at the ref because he made a bad call. The reason that the stakes are so high with policing is that lethal force is authorized. Therefore, when someone makes a bad call, your team didn't lose the game. Somebody may lose their life who shouldn't have. That's where the rub comes in, right?
It isn't, oh, we locked up a guy for the weekend because we thought he is the one that stole this car, and then we ended up finding the right guy and we let him go. And he, not good, but
right.
He gets to go
Or
home.
people go to jail for 30 years.
Yes,
and they shouldn't. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what is policing, what is it not, what do we really want out of our police forces. This is a question that's burning for me personally, just as a citizen. This has nothing to do with my calls, nothing to do with my ministry work. I'm just musing out loud because I see America right now floundering on this question of what is it we actually expect out of our cops. And if you don't know what policing is, how you're going to define it, and you don't know then what you expect out of your police force, it's going to become this profession that's not thought of as oh, I'm proud of my son or daughter because they grew up to be a cop. It's going to be a profession, and I've seen this in other countries where I've lived. I've lived in other places. It becomes a profession for the corrupt. It becomes a profession for those who can't do something else.
It's ostracized. It's the you're the tax collector of your society almost.
Yeah, because if it becomes a profession for the corrupt, or it becomes a profession for those who can't do something else, it's not thought of as an honorable profession that serves your community. We're going to have a problem. And that doesn't create fewer George Floyd situations. And that's what the political screaming that I find deafening about these issues with the police today, that's what I find discouraging. You're not going to create fewer George Floyds. You're going to create more.
Yep. So I don't know if this is a sidebar, but it makes me think of a little bit of some of the work that I did in politics. And it's a different profession. But we did some work with some carpenters.
Okay.
In the
like union guys or
union guys.
Yeah.
And the big thing for them was a matter of gaining trust in the sense that maybe you're looking at getting your basement done. You know, you've got your basement in your house, and I want to get the basement finished. I want to know that I've got guys that have come in that are competent, that know how to do the work well, that are following the laws, you know, in terms of, you know, hiring people that are supposed to be here that are properly documented, you know. And it was about their big focus, and the term for it was misclassification and classification of workers, and knowing that you've got a licensed bonded, electrician or a licensed bonded, whoever it is that's working on your house, or even that much more to the scale if you're talking commercial construction, to know that you've got somebody that's reputable, you've got somebody that is, you know, has in a sense a degree. You know, the way that you don't go to a doctor that is just some guy that says he can do medical. You like to see that they've got their MD or their DO or some sort of qualification.
I'm totally cool. I just printed off my diploma on my printer. Look, it's right there.
But, you know, to the point that you want to have these qualifications so that there's trust there, that when they do the wiring in your house, you know your house isn't going to burn down.
Well, what are you trying to say with the police force then?
So I'm trying to say that for me, it still comes down to what are the things that then do a couple different things that help rebuild the trust and the relational aspect of policing within communities, whether that's North St. Louis or South St. Louis or Lincoln, Nebraska, or wherever it happens to be. And I think part of that involves having a certain degree of credential or respect that leads to the type of thing you're talking about, that encourages the idea that when I grow up, I want to be a police officer because it's something that's seen as valuable, it's something that's seen as honored, it's something that's seen as respected. But it's not going to be respected if that trust isn't repaired, isn't grown. You've told me. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You've told me the story before about, I think it was, you said your grandpa or great grandfather was a police officer.
My great grandfather was a cop in Nashville, and he walked a beat. Now, you want to talk about trust, and you want to talk about what policing can be. Now, it can't go back to this today. I want to say this out of the gate. It cannot go back to this today. There's lots of reasons why, sociologically. But at the time, the fact that he walked a beat, and he didn't carry a firearm with him that I'm aware of. He carried what used to be called a billy club. It was like a oak stick,
Yep.
Or hickory stick, and that thing will crack your skull open. I mean, it was a weapon if you had to use it, but it didn't carry the same immediate threat. You know what I mean? As a firearm does.
It does. I mean, you could kill somebody with a billy club, but you'd have to really try.
Yeah, and most of the time you're just incapacitating that person. Now, again, you can't go back to that today. I realize we're living in a different world because it's called escalation, right? But at the time, that many generations ago, he was a cop in Nashville. He was walking a beat. When you played cops and robbers in the backyard as a child, I don't know if everybody still does this. My generation, we still played cops and robbers.
I did it, yes.
Okay, so
cap guns and
yeah. So when you played cops and robbers in the backyard, the idea that you had in your head about policing was that the police get the bad guys, that they're the white hats and they get the black hats, and I grew up on the books about the Lone Ranger and all,
You like westerns?
Yeah, and I like westerns, and and it's all that, and you're going to get the bad guy, and that's what you grew up believing that policing was about. It's not, though. Policing is really about policy enforcement, and it's about catching infringement when it happens. It's not about, I'm pretty sure my neighbor deals pot.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my next door neighbor deals pot. Whatever. I don't like that he's doing that in a state where that's illegal.
Yeah.
Right? The cops aren't going to find him. They're going to find him on a traffic stop if he infringes policy while operating a motor vehicle. They're going to find him on a traffic stop, and then they're going to get him for possession. They're not going to get him for dealing. They don't know if he's dealing. They only know he's possessing.
Yep.
Do you see what I'm saying? But when my great-grandfather walked a beat, he knew all his neighbors, and he walked the beat. So that means that he knew these people, and he knew when something was off in the neighborhood.
Well, what it makes me think of is that policing then could be more proactive, and now it's much more just reactive.
Well, you're policing people you don't even know.
Yeah.
There was a situation that happened down in Florida recently. I can't remember which county. I don't think it was Dade. It was a different county. But there was something that just happened down in Florida. The sheriff's department, that's a whole different can of worms. The sheriff's department versus a city police force. But the sheriff's department stopped a car, and I saw the recording of it. You want to talk about de-escalation and not making the situation worse. One of the deputies was actually friendly talking with the guy in the car, saying, because they saw that they had kids in the back seat. There was a kid and a dog. And he said, I got babies of my own at home. And he was being just generally nice and trying to keep the situation cool. The guy in the car is black. The deputy's white. We all know the racial tension that's all over the country right now. This deputy was doing it right, in my opinion, as a citizen. I mean, my opinion's worth exactly what. But I'm watching this video going, this guy's keeping it cool and calm. The guy jumps out of the car with an automatic weapon and starts firing at that deputy and other deputies around. So now they have to go to their sidearms and they have to put this guy on the floor. And they put him down, you know? And it's like, you're policing people you don't even know. So even if you try, some people try to come at cops today. My point about this is some people, I think, try to come at cops today and say, well, you know, your attitude was poor and you talked to people in a rough, gruff, you know, you were escalating by your time. But here's some deputies talking to this guy about, yeah, man, I got babies of my own at home, and just trying to keep it relational. But you're policing people you don't know from Adam. Turns out this guy was a career criminal. They were still in the process of running the plates. But it was somebody else's car, so it wasn't going to get to him. You know, do you see what I'm saying? And then this guy jumps out of nowhere and decides to make it a bad day for everybody.
Well, and so imagine being the cop then walking up to that circumstance.
Right.
You know that there's this spectrum of possibility of who this person is.
Mm-hmm.
And the spectrum could be as innocuous as, oh, your plates are expired, so we pulled you over, why don't you go get them fixed, we're fine.
Right.
To jumping out of the car with an automatic weapon and firing on you.
And now it's everybody's bad day.
And you have no idea who this person is, so you have no idea what to expect.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. So what happened with my great-grandfather's generation, that's not ever going to happen today. But it bred trust. It also bred accountability. Everybody knew him. And they knew him they knew him like you know your barber.
Yeah.
You're not screaming, officer, officer. Actually, everybody called him Honey. Because hey, this is a guy with a badge, and everybody calls him Honey because he was an exceedingly sweet man. I do know of a couple situations where he did have to apply force to the situation, like dealing with a drunk or something like that. But so I know those stories. But everybody called him Honey. And by the way, he was a World War I vet. Like, he was a combat veteran. Like, you did not want to mess with this dude if it came to that. But he was so sweet to people that everybody called him Honey. So that's a real Southern story, you know, Officer Honey, you know. But they called him Honey. No one's screaming, officer, officer. They'd scream, Honey, come here and help. That's a different sense of community that I don't think our current situation affords police officers, even if they wanted it. Because officers want to be trusted. They want to be known. They want to be trusted. But I don't know. I can't come up to a Lincoln cop here in town and be like, hey, George, like, you know, like I don't know this person.
That very well for them might somehow bring up, what does this guy need and do I need to be on alert because there's something that he must be up to that I need to protect myself against.
And that's what I'm saying. There's a breakdown of trust on both sides.
Yep.
You don't talk to a police officer today like you talk to other people in your community. And everybody in your community has a role. Like, I know my barber.
Yep.
Tom, you're the best. I need to get in to see you. I know my barber. And I know the barber across at the other station, Derek, also a great guy. If I see Derek out, like at a restaurant, I've seen Derek out on the streets before, and I just be like, he'll be like, hey, Pastor, how you doing? I say, hey, Derek, what's up, man? You know, and we talk for a minute. And we know each other in the community, right? The fact that police don't have that, and maybe they don't want it. Maybe they don't want it. Maybe that, for them today, they've been taught that somehow blurs the lines. But you can't have trust without relationship. So if we're not going to have that kind of relationship, and that's not going to be the basis of trust, again, what do we want out of our policing? Americans are famous for swinging the pendulum too far one way and then too far back the other. We went in the space of 20 years from militarize the police to completely defund the police.
Yep.
And nothing in the middle. And I don't hear enough in politicians, because again, if you're on the right, you just say support the thin blue line because it gets you votes. If you're on the left, you say, ugh, cops, I hate them too, you know. And then for that constituent base, they're going to trust you or vote for you or whatever. It's not working. Neither of these approaches is working. And it's going to take the ability for people to sit down with police. You know, we're giving our opinion as a couple of clergy.
Yeah.
You get on mainstream media, you get these talking heads giving their opinion about the police. Who's asking the police?
Well, and not only that, but just at what point do you actually facilitate a conversation to say, here's where I'm coming from, here's where I'm coming from. How can we learn to work better together? How can we learn to,
Yeah.
you're not going to get to the trust of your great grandfather and honey, but maybe you can get some level of respect and trust that's there. Of here's how we can coexist.
Here's my question of who's not at the table. Where are the police unions? Police unions exist for what? I guess to protect the pension plan. And if you're a police union guy and you don't like that I said that, come find me, buddy. I'll sit down and talk with you all day long. But why do we have these police unions? Is it just to protect the pension plan? I want to see politicians sit down with the union.
Yep.
I want to see the union come to the table and have a voice in what policing is going to look like moving forward. Because the union cannot simply exist to protect a pension plan. They have to be the voice of these police saying, as a professional working class of people, this is what we see.
Yeah. Or the union to be there to make sure you circle the wagons when a guy in Memphis that should have never had a badge and gun in the first place does something bad, so we're going to be there to protect him.
But I want to know how did the city council shut down any kind of union voice on that?
Yep.
Did the union speak up or did they not? And if they did speak up, why weren't you listening?
Or did they acquiesce and let it go and think this would be better for us somehow?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard. I don't know the details on that, but I think you're right and all that. And
yeah, I don't know. For me, the issue is, what's it going to look like? It can't be one extreme or the other, and it can't just be talking heads or politicians who need votes. Look, democracy is a necessary evil, y'all. That's how I look at it. It's fine.
And it's messy.
Well, but you have to understand that fundamentally, you didn't have a vetting process that's the same as other professions. In order to be clergy, I had to pass tests. I had to go through stringent seminary training. I had to go through on-the-job training. I had to pass psych profile after psych profile after psych profile. It was levels of psych profiles, okay? I had to do all this stuff in order to be presented and said, you can now be considered clergy if a church will bring you on. There is nothing like that for politicians. These are supposed to sometimes be the cream of the crop people, but you don't know what they're supposed to be the cream of the crop at. It's a popularity contest. If these are the people who make the decision without the police force at the table,
yep,
that to me is a big red flag.
And also,
that's what I'm trying to say.
And also, I think at the same point, the church you talked about in Memphis or in St. Louis at the beginning, somebody from that community to say, here's what it's like in our community, here's what it's like in South St. Louis,
right,
in our community, here's things that would make it better for us in our interactions with the police.
Yeah.
And to start to build some of that trust, and it's not going to get to the fully interpersonal level where you know your police officer by name, but at least to start to bridge some of that to say, where can we find common ground so that spectrum of possibility when I walk up on a traffic stop is maybe narrowed a little bit.
It just needs to be narrowed a little bit to start moving things in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I want it to be because as a citizen, I want to see policing still as an honorable profession for someone to go into.
Well, think about
something that you'd be proud of your son or daughter for growing up and becoming a cop.
Well, and think about it and this is going to be being the idealist that I am.
Yeah.
But and I don't know how many years this takes. If you had community meetings and you had city council meetings and you had really hard work to figure out how to build some of this trust, to get to the point that on some level, even if you're in North St. Louis or you're in South St. Louis or in whatever circumstance you are, and maybe it's still in variations in degree, but you've got a 12-year-old kid who's in trouble and they see a guy with a badge and be like, I know that's a guy that I can go to.
That's
for
safe.
help.
I can run to that person for help. Yeah.
And try to get to that kind of idea.
To round this out on that idea,
because I guess to answer the question, that's to be something that's really important.
Well, before we left Memphis to come here, like a couple weeks before we left Memphis, we went out as a family. We came back. The light in my back, I had an outbuilding. I had an outbuilding there in Memphis. The light in my big barn was on. I didn't leave it on. So I'm like, uh-oh. So I called the police. and said, "We got to check out the barn. I don't know if it's somebody who's homeless. I'm not. I don't want to press charges if it is. I just, they can't just sleep in my
I'd
barn."
rather you check it out than me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to see what happens if I go in there instead of you go in there. So I called the police. They showed up. It was a team. It was a male and a female officer working together as a team. So professional, and now my daughter is frightened. She's very young, and she's frightened because Daddy thinks something's wrong enough to call the police. So now, as a little girl, she's now frightened. Those police were so professional, and they opened up the trunk of their cruiser and pulled out a little teddy bear. They just had these as a department, and they said to my daughter, "Everything's going to be okay. Why don't you hold on to this teddy bear for me?" And so she held on to the teddy bear. They went and checked out the barn. Everything was fine. It was probably somebody looking for something to steal, and they didn't find anything. So then they
left the light on.
They left the light on. So we're fine. So we just locked everything back up, and then they came back and made sure my daughter was okay, and then they left. She was. Oh, they gave her a little badge sticker, like for little kids, and they put it on. More of those kinds of policing interactions with the public. I hope to get back to that as a society instead of this everyone looking askance at one another. Like maybe the cops are the bad guys. They're not. They're just members of this community who are trying to do a very complicated and difficult job for the sake of the community. And whatever we can do to narrow that gap moving forward, this is what I'm praying for as a Christian man, as a citizen of this country. I'm praying we don't go down the road I've seen it go in other societies where policing becomes, like you said, like a tax collector kind of word. That these are people who do a necessary job for the government, but they're not part of our community. Because that interaction with the police was very much, I may not know you by first name, but you acted like we are neighbors, and you acted like you're a part of this community just like I am.
So you're here to protect and serve, and
right.
Versus the I just thought about this now, but the dynamic very much to me, and I feel like this is on both the policing side and the citizen side, is everybody's got their hackles up, and it's just this tension, and
right.
I can't trust you, so I got to be ready to protect myself.
Right. So that's what I'm praying for moving forward. So let's see where it goes in this country, but we're not going to solve anything today. But I just wanted to muse on that for a minute because I don't see Americans getting real about the questions they're asking about policing. I hope that we have a way forward as a society to ask better questions. And usually if you ask better questions, you get better answers.
And like you said, facilitate some of those conversations that need to happen to actually help maybe try to build some of that trust rather than tear it down.
Absolutely. All right. We'll catch you next time.